Picture this. It's 2 a.m. Your phone rings. Hospital. Your daughter, 7 months pregnant, beaten unconscious with a golf club by her own husband. But here's what will shock you. The affair that triggered this brutal attack never existed. The mistress had no idea she was being used. The loving husband had been planning this murder for months. This isn't just a story about domestic violence. This is about calculated revenge so devastating that, by the end, you'll understand why some men should never underestimate a mother's fury. Hit that like button if you're ready for justice. Subscribe for more incredible true stories. And let me know in the comments what you think should happen to men like this. This story will leave you speechless. The phone rang at 2:17 in the morning, cutting through the silence like a blade. Sarah Thompson had been having trouble sleeping lately, her 7-month pregnant belly making it impossible to find a comfortable position. But this wasn't the baby keeping her awake tonight. It was the text messages she'd found on Marcus's phone. "Hello," she whispered, trying not to wake Marcus beside her. "Is this Sarah Thompson?" The voice was professional but urgent. "This is Dr. Jennifer Mills from St. Mary's Emergency Department. I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Your husband, Marcus Cole, has been in an accident." Sarah sat up, her heart racing. "What kind of accident? Is he okay?" "Ma'am, I'd rather discuss this in person. How quickly can you get here?" 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the sterile hallway of St. Mary's Hospital, her hands shaking as she approached the nurse's station. The smell of antiseptic made her stomach turn, though that might have been the pregnancy. "I'm looking for my husband, Marcus Cole," she said to the nurse behind the desk. The nurse looked up with tired eyes. "Are you Sarah Thompson?" "Yes." "Dr. Mills is waiting for you in conference room B. Down the hall, third door on your right." Dr. Mills was younger than Sarah expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes that had seen too much tragedy. She gestured for Sarah to sit in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. "Mrs. Thompson, I need to ask you some questions about your husband's condition when he left home tonight." Sarah frowned. "His condition I don't understand. What happened to Marcus?" "Ma'am, your husband wasn't in an accident. He was brought here by ambulance after neighbors reported hearing screams from your address. He's been arrested for domestic violence." The words didn't make sense. Sarah stared at the doctor, waiting for clarification that never came. "I think there's been a mistake," Sarah said slowly. "I'm Sarah Thompson. Marcus is my husband. We live at 426 Oak Street." Dr. Mills pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a photo. It was her driver's license picture. "Mrs. Thompson, you were brought here unconscious with severe injuries. You've been in surgery for the past 2 hours." Sarah looked down at herself, confused. She was wearing her pajamas, standing in a hospital hallway, talking to a doctor. How could she be in surgery? "I don't understand," she whispered. "Mrs. Thompson, what's the last thing you remember from tonight?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to think. She remembered finding the text messages on Marcus's phone. She remembered waiting for him to come home from his late meeting. She remembered. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Marcus coming through the front door, his face twisted with rage, the golf club in his hands. The first strike to her ribs that dropped her to her knees. "Oh God," she breathed, her hands flying to her stomach. "The baby. Your daughter was born premature, but she's fighting. She's in the NICU. We've named her Hope for now, since you weren't conscious to choose a name." Sarah started crying then. Great heaving sobs that made her entire body ache. Everything came flooding back. The confrontation about the affair. Marcus's cold explanation of why she deserved what was happening. The systematic way he'd beaten her while she begged him to stop for the baby's sake. "Where is he now?" she managed to ask. "Marcus is in police custody. Detective Murphy will want to speak with you when you're ready." "Can I see my daughter?" Dr. Mills smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "Of course, but first we need to examine you and make sure you're stable." As they walked toward the examination room, Sarah realized this was just the beginning. Marcus hadn't just beaten her. He'd tried to kill her and their unborn child. And somehow, impossibly, they had both survived. But survival was just the first step. Now came the hardest part, proving what really happened in that house tonight. Detective James Murphy arrived at St. Mary's Hospital as the first hints of dawn painted the sky gray. 20 years on the force had taught him to read between the lines of domestic violence cases, and this one already had red flags everywhere. He found Marcus Cole in the waiting room, pacing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. Designer polo shirt, perfectly styled hair, the kind of concerned husband expression that never quite reached the eyes. "I don't care what it costs," Marcus was saying into the phone. "Find me the best lawyer who handles these kinds of situations. Women who make false accusations when they're emotional. You know, pregnancy hormones." Murphy approached quietly, catching the end of the conversation. Marcus hung up and turned to find the detective standing directly behind him. "Mr. Cole, I'm Detective Murphy. I need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight." Marcus's face immediately shifted to concerned husband mode. "Of course, Detective. Anything to help. This whole situation is just terrible. Sarah fell down our stairs. I wasn't even home when it happened." Murphy pulled out his notebook. "What time did you get home tonight?" "Around 10:45. I found Sarah at the bottom of the stairs, unconscious. I immediately called 911. "Where were you before 10:45? "Work meeting that ran late. We're launching a new insurance product line next month." Murphy made notes, watching Marcus's body language. No fidgeting, no nervous tells. This guy was either telling the truth or he was very, very good at lying. "Mr. Cole, your neighbor across the street has a doorbell camera. The footage shows you entering your house at 10:23, not 10:45. Something flickered behind Marcus's eyes, but his expression didn't change. "Technology isn't always accurate. Detective, the timestamp could be wrong. The footage also shows you carrying what appears to be a golf club." Now Marcus did pause, just for a second. "I had my golf bag in the car. I was planning to hit the driving range tomorrow morning before work. Why would you bring a single club into the house?" "I was checking the grip. I thought it might need to be replaced." Murphy had heard better lies from drunk teenagers caught shoplifting. "Mr. I need you to know that your wife has regained consciousness. She's told us what really happened tonight." Marcus's mask slipped just slightly. "Sarah's been under a lot of stress with the pregnancy. Hormonal changes can affect memory and judgment. She's probably confused about what happened. She's confused about you beating her with a golf club." "Detective, I would never hurt my wife. I love Sarah more than anything in this world. We're about to have our first child together." Murphy looked at Marcus carefully. Even now, talking about nearly killing his pregnant wife, the man showed no emotion beyond mild concern for his reputation. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to need you to come to the station for a formal interview." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet, but I strongly recommend you call that lawyer." As Murphy walked away, he heard Marcus immediately get back on his phone. "It's worse than I thought, Bifai. The cops are believing her lies. I need someone who can handle unstable women making false accusations." Murphy paused in the hallway, making a note to check Marcus's phone records. Something about this whole situation felt choreographed, like Marcus had been preparing for this moment for a long time. He found Sarah in room 307, sitting up in bed with bandages covering half her face. The left side was swollen and discolored, and she moved carefully, like someone with broken ribs. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Murphy. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you about what happened tonight." Sarah looked toward the door nervously. "Is Marcus here?" "He's downstairs. He can't come up here without permission." "You're safe." "Am I? Because 12 hours ago, I thought I was safe in my own home." Murphy pulled a chair close to Sarah's bed. "Tell me what happened, in your own words." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was steady but hollow. "I found text messages on Marcus's phone, explicit messages between him and a woman named Elena Foster. When I confronted him about the affair, he said I was trying to ruin his life." "What happened next?" "He went to the hall closet and got his driver, the golf club. He said I needed to learn my place and stop snooping through his personal things." Murphy wrote carefully, noting the details. "Where did Marcus hit you?" "My ribs first. When I doubled over, he hit me in the back. When I fell down, he kicked me in the stomach." Sarah's voice broke. "I begged him to stop because of the baby." "What did Marcus say when you begged him to stop?" Sarah looked directly at Murphy for the first time. He said maybe losing the baby would teach me not to cause problems. Murphy felt a familiar anger building in his chest. Marcus Cole had just moved from domestic violence to attempted murder. Mrs. Thompson, this isn't the first time Marcus has hurt you, is it? The question hung in the air. Sarah's automatic response would be to deny it, to protect him, to minimize the pattern of abuse. But something had changed in her during those moments when she thought she was going to die. No, she said quietly. It's not the first time. Elena Foster sat in the break room at Patterson and Associates law firm, staring at her phone in confusion. She'd received 17 missed calls from someone named Detective Murphy, and the voicemail message made no sense. Miss Foster, this is Detective Murphy with the Metro Police. I need to speak with you regarding Marcus Cole and an incident involving his wife. Please call me back immediately. Well, Elena knew Marcus from the insurance company where she worked as a paralegal. They'd had lunch a few times, talked about work, but nothing more. Marcus was devoted to his pregnant wife, Sarah. He showed Elena ultrasound pictures and talked constantly about becoming a father. Her phone rang again. Detective Murphy. Miss Foster, thank you for calling back. I need to ask you about your relationship with Marcus Cole. We're colleagues. We work together sometimes on insurance claims. Why, what's this about? Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come to the police station. Marcus's wife is in the hospital, and your name has come up in our investigation. An hour later, Elena sat across from Detective Murphy in a small interview room, her hands shaking as she held a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Miss Foster, I need to show you some text messages. Murphy placed printed copies in front of her. These are communications between you and Marcus Cole over the past 3 months. Elena read the first few messages and her face went white. They were explicit, sexual, detailed plans for meetings and intimate encounters. I never sent these, she said immediately. I would never write anything like this. These messages came from your phone number, but I didn't send them. Elena was reading faster now, her horror growing with each message. This one says I told Marcus I loved him and wanted him to leave his wife. I've never said anything like that to anyone. Murphy leaned forward. Miss Foster, when was the last time you had physical access to your phone? Marcus helped me set up my new phone about 2 months ago. He said he was helping me transfer everything from my old phone. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. He had my phone for an entire weekend. Did you notice anything unusual after you got your phone back? Sometimes I'd see messages in my sent folder that I didn't remember sending, but they were work-related, so I thought maybe I'd sent them and forgotten. Murphy showed Elena another set of messages. These are texts Marcus sent to his wife, claiming you had sent them to him. Elena read the messages and started crying. He made me look like some kind of predator trying to break up his marriage. Miss Foster, Marcus has been manipulating both you and his wife. He created fake evidence of an affair that never existed. But why would he do that? So when he beat his wife for being suspicious, it would look like she was a jealous, paranoid woman who drove him to violence. Elena stared at Detective Murphy as the full scope of Marcus's manipulation became clear. You're saying Marcus planned this whole thing. I'm saying Marcus is a very careful predator who creates elaborate justifications for his abuse. Elena put her head in her hands. That poor woman, she must think I'm a monster. Marcus has been using you as an unwitting accomplice for months. Miss Foster, you're as much a victim as Sarah is. What do you need me to do? Murphy pulled out a small recording device. I need you to confront Marcus. Get him to admit what he's been doing. Elena nodded without hesitation. When? Today. He's been released on bail, and he's already calling you. As if on cue, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency? Need to see you. My life is falling apart. Elena looked at Detective Murphy. What do I say? Tell him you're confused about what's happening. Let him explain. And Elena, Murphy's expression was serious. Marcus is dangerous. If you feel unsafe at any point, we'll have officers nearby. Elena agreed to meet Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. As she left the police station, she thought about all the times Marcus had seemed like such a devoted husband, so worried about his unstable wife's emotional state during her pregnancy. It had all been an act. Every conversation, every lunch, every moment of apparent concern for Sarah had been Marcus building a case for why his wife was crazy and he was the reasonable victim. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated Elena's intelligence and her sense of right and wrong. Now she was going to help Detective Murphy prove what Marcus had really done. The meeting was set for 3 o'clock. Elena had 2 hours to prepare for the most important conversation of her life. The coffee shop on Fifth Street was busy enough to provide cover, but quiet enough for Elena to record clearly. She sat in a corner booth. The wire Detective Murphy had given her, hidden under her sweater, and waited for Marcus to arrive. He appeared at exactly 3 o'clock, looking like a man barely holding himself together. His usual perfect appearance was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "Elena, thank God you came." Marcus slid into the booth across from her, reaching for her hands. "You're the only person who understands what I'm going through." Elena pulled her hands back gently. "Marcus, I'm confused about everything that's happening. The police said Sarah is in the hospital. Sarah had an accident. She fell down our stairs last night." Marcus's voice was smooth, practiced. "But now she's making these crazy accusations, saying I hurt her on purpose. That's terrible. But Marcus, I need to ask you about something." Elena pulled out her phone. "I've been looking at my text messages from the past few months. Some of these messages, I don't remember sending them." Marcus's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. "Which messages?" Elena showed him her phone. "These ones where I supposedly told you I loved you and wanted you to leave Sarah." "Marcus, I never sent these texts." "Elena, you've been under a lot of stress at work. Sometimes people don't remember everything they do when they're overwhelmed. I would remember telling a married man I loved him." Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying Elena's face. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying someone else sent those messages from my phone. Someone who had access to it for an entire weekend." Marcus's mask was starting to slip. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking for an explanation. How did messages I never wrote end up in my sent folder?" "Technology glitches happen all the time. Elena, phones can duplicate messages. Timestamps can be wrong." Elena leaned forward. "Marcus, the police showed me messages you sent to Sarah, claiming I had written them to you. Messages where I supposedly said terrible things about her." Marcus stood up suddenly. "The police are trying to turn everyone against me. Sarah's making false accusations, and now they're convincing you to doubt your own memories." "Sit down, Marcus. Please." He sat back down, but his demeanor had changed completely. The concerned husband act was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Elena, whose side are you on here?" "I'm on the side of the truth." The truth is that Sarah is a mentally unstable woman who's trying to destroy me because I want a divorce." "Is that why you beat her with a golf club?" Marcus went very still. "I never said anything about a golf club." Elena realized her mistake too late. The police hadn't told her about the golf club. Sarah had told Detective Murphy in private. "The police mentioned it," she said quickly. "No, they didn't, because I never told them about the golf club." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "You've been working with them, haven't you?" Elena's heart was racing, Sarah, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Marcus, just tell me what really happened." "What really happened is that my pregnant wife discovered I was planning to leave her after the baby was born. She threatened to take everything, the house, custody, child support I couldn't afford. So you decided to kill her." Marcus stared at Elena for a long moment. "I decided to solve my problems efficiently, by committing murder, by eliminating complications." Marcus's voice was completely flat now, devoid of any emotion. "Sarah was going to ruin my life financially. The baby was going to make everything worse. It was easier to handle things cleanly." Elena felt sick. "You planned to kill your own child. I planned to start over without complications I couldn't afford." "Marcus, do you hear yourself? You're talking about murdering your family." "I'm talking about survival, Elena. Something people like you don't understand because you've never had real pressure." Elena stood up, no longer caring about maintaining the pretense. "You're completely insane." Marcus smiled for the first time during their conversation. "I'm completely practical. Unfortunately, Sarah survived, which creates new complications." What kind of complications? Witnesses are problematic. People who know too much about my personal business. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. I've invested too much in this plan to let it fall apart now. Elena backed away from the table. Don't come near me, Marcus. Elena, you know too much about my situation with Sarah. That makes you a liability. Elena turned and walked quickly toward the exit, hearing Marcus call after her. We're not done talking. Elena, I know where you live. She made it to her car and immediately called Detective Murphy. He confessed to everything. Attempted murder, the fake messages, all of it. But Detective, he threatened me. I think he's planning to hurt me too. Where are you now? My car in the coffee shop parking lot. He's still inside. Stay in your car and lock the doors. We're on our way. As Elena waited for the police to arrive, she thought about Sarah lying in that hospital bed, probably thinking Elena had stolen her husband and destroyed her marriage. The truth was so much worse. Elena hadn't been Marcus's mistress. She'd been his unwitting accomplice in attempted murder. But now she was going to make sure Marcus paid for what he'd done to Sarah and their baby. And she was going to help make sure he never hurt anyone else again. Sarah held Hope for the first time 3 days after the attack, sitting in a rocking chair beside the NICU window while machines monitored every breath her daughter took. Hope weighed 3 pounds and 2 ounces, her skin translucent, her fingers impossibly small, but her eyes were alert and focused on Sarah's face. She knows you're her mama, said Janet, the NICU nurse who'd been caring for Hope since birth. Babies born under traumatic circumstances often have a special bond with their mothers. They know you fought for them. Sarah stroked Hope's tiny hand with one finger. Is she going to be okay? Babies born at 33 weeks usually do very well with proper care. Hope's breathing is stable. She's responding well to feeding, and her reflexes are strong. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Bennett, her best friend. Saw the news about Marcus's arrest. Coming to see you as soon as visiting hours start. The news. Sarah had forgotten that her husband beating his pregnant wife with a golf club would be a news story. She wondered what people were saying, whether they believed Marcus's version of events or hers. Mrs. Thompson. Janet touched Sarah's shoulder gently. You have visitors? Detective Murphy appeared in the doorway with a woman Sarah didn't recognize. Late 50s, professional appearance, with kind but sharp eyes. Sarah, this is Judge Patricia Wells. She's been following your case. The woman stepped forward. Actually, Sarah, I'm your mother. Sarah stared at the stranger claiming to be her mother. She'd been estranged from her parents since she was 18, when they disapproved of her decision to become a nurse instead of going to law school like her mother wanted. Mom. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia Wells sat down in the chair beside Sarah's. I've been following your case because when I saw the name Sarah Thompson in the domestic violence reports, I hoped it wasn't you. But I knew it was. How did you know? Because you're exactly like me at your age. Too trusting, too willing to see the best in people, too quick to blame yourself when things go wrong. Sarah looked at her mother, really seeing her for the first time in over a decade. You're a judge now. Family court. I specialize in domestic violence cases and custody disputes. Patricia looked at Hope sleeping in Sarah's arms. Is this my granddaughter? Hope Elizabeth Thompson. I gave her my maiden name. Patricia smiled. Good choice. Sarah, I need to tell you something about Marcus that you might not know. Detective Murphy pulled out a folder. Your mother's been investigating Marcus independently. She has information about his past that changes everything. Patricia opened the folder. Marcus Cole has been planning this attack for months, possibly longer. He's not just abusive. He's a calculating predator who's done this before. Sarah shifted Hope to her other arm. Done what before? 3 years ago, Marcus was in a relationship with a woman named Amanda Wilson. He beat her unconscious with a lamp base, then paid her $43,000 to drop the charges. He paid her off. Amanda Wilson's student loans were paid off in full 2 weeks after she dropped the restraining order against Marcus. Same pattern. Make the victim look unstable. Then buy your way out of consequences. Detective Murphy added, Amanda Wilson's agreed to testify about Marcus's pattern of behavior. But there's more. Sarah, Marcus has been stealing from you. Sarah stared at them. What do you mean stealing? Patricia pulled out bank statements and credit applications. Credit cards opened in your name without your knowledge. A second mortgage on your house that you never signed. Marcus forged your signature on everything. How much money? $87,000. All of it used to cover gambling debts. Oh, Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Gambling debts. Marcus doesn't gamble. Marcus owes over $200,000 to some very dangerous people. Detective Murphy said. They've been calling his work daily, threatening him. Patricia pulled out an insurance document. This is the most important piece. Sarah, Marcus took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. He forged your signature and listed himself as the sole beneficiary. Sarah looked down at Hope, then back at her mother. He was planning to kill me. He was planning to murder you and let Hope die, then collect the insurance money to pay off his gambling debts and start over. But I survived. You survived because you're stronger than Marcus calculated, and because you had a reason to fight. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, processing the enormity of Marcus's deception. Mom, why are you helping me? We haven't spoken in 10 years. Patricia reached over and touched Hope's tiny hand. Because I failed you once. When you were 18 and chose your own path. I should have supported you instead of trying to control you. I'm not going to fail you again. What happens now? Now we make sure Marcus never hurts anyone else. Detective Murphy said, Elena Foster got him to confess on tape. He admitted to the attempted murder, the fake affair, everything. Elena wants to see you, Patricia added. She needs you to know that none of the affair was real. Marcus manipulated both of you. Sarah looked at her mother and Detective Murphy, then down at Hope sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding her birth. I want to see Elena, and I want to make sure Marcus goes to prison for a very long time. That's exactly what's going to happen, Patricia said, because Marcus Cole made one critical mistake. What mistake? Patricia smiled. He hurt the daughter of a family court judge who specializes in cases like this. Marcus thinks he can manipulate the legal system like he manipulated you. He's about to learn he's wrong. Elena Foster stood outside Sarah's hospital room, holding a bouquet of flowers and trying to find the courage to knock. Detective Murphy had arranged the meeting, but Elena still felt sick about her unknowing role in Marcus's plan. Rachel Bennett answered the door, a petite woman with tired eyes and paint-stained fingers from her job at the diner. You must be Elena, Rachel said. Sarah's been waiting for you. Elena entered the room to find Sarah sitting up in bed, holding her baby. The left side of Sarah's face was still swollen and bruised, but her eyes were alert and kind. Elena, please sit down. Sarah's voice was gentler than Elena had expected. I need to apologize to you. Elena set the flowers on the bedside table. You need to apologize to me, Sarah. I'm the one who should be apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. Marcus used both of us. Elena sat in the chair beside Sarah's bed. I had no idea about the fake messages. I thought Marcus was this devoted husband worried about his emotionally unstable wife. That's exactly what he wanted you to think. Sarah adjusted Hope in her arms. He's very good at making his victims look crazy while he looks reasonable. How long was he hurting you? Sarah was quiet for a moment. The physical violence started about 6 months ago, but the emotional abuse, the controlling behavior, that started almost immediately after we got married 2 years ago. What kind of controlling behavior? He managed all our finances, checked my phone regularly, came home at lunch to make sure I was where I was supposed to be. He said I wasn't smart about practical things, that I needed his guidance. Elena felt sick. And I was helping him prove you were paranoid by providing alibis for his fake meetings. Marcus had been planning this for months. Elena, maybe longer. You couldn't have known. Rachel spoke up from the corner of the room. I tried to tell Sarah something was wrong with Marcus. He was too controlling, too perfect. But abusers are very good at isolating their victims from friends and family. Elena looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. Can I ask you about the night it happened? Sarah's expression darkened. I found the fake text messages between you and Marcus on his phone. When I confronted him, he said I was trying to ruin his life. Then he went to the hall closet and got his golf club. I'm so sorry, Sarah. If I had known what he was doing. You would have stopped him, just like you did when Detective Murphy asked you to wear a wire. You risked your own safety to help me get justice. Elena started crying. I keep thinking about all the times Marcus talked about you at work. He made you sound like this unstable, jealous woman who was making his life miserable. I actually felt sorry for him. That's Marcus's specialty, making himself look like the victim while destroying the people around him. Patricia Wells appeared in the doorway. Elena, I'm Sarah's mother, Judge Patricia Wells. I wanted to thank you personally for your courage in confronting Marcus. Elena stood up. Judge Wells, will my testimony be enough to convict him? Combined with the physical evidence, the financial fraud, and Marcus's recorded confession. Yes, he's going to prison for a very long time. What if about the fake affair evidence will that affect the case? Patricia smiled grimly. Actually, it makes the case stronger. It proves premeditation. Marcus didn't beat Sarah in a moment of passion. He spent months setting up justification for attempted murder. Sarah shifted hope to her other arm. Elena, I need you to know something. When I found those text messages, I hated you. I thought you'd stolen my husband and destroyed my marriage. I don't blame you for that. But the truth is so much worse than an affair. Marcus never loved either of us. We were just tools he used to get what he wanted. Elena sat back down. What did he want? Freedom from financial responsibility. Patricia answered. Marcus saw Sarah and the baby as expensive obligations he couldn't afford. Murder was just his solution to a budget problem. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed the casual cruelty of Marcus's calculations. Sarah, Elena said finally, what happens now for you and Hope? Sarah looked down at her daughter, then at the three women surrounding her hospital bed. Now we heal, we rebuild, we make sure other women don't go through what we went through. How do we do that? Patricia pulled out a business card. I'm starting a foundation for domestic violence prevention and survivor support. I'd like both of you to be involved. Elena read the card. The Hope Foundation. Sarah smiled for the first time since Elena had arrived. Named after someone who survived the worst possible circumstances and came out fighting. Rachel laughed. This little girl's going to grow up knowing she's surrounded by the strongest women in the world. As Elena prepared to leave, Sarah called her back. Elena, Marcus threatened you during your meeting. Are you going to be okay? Detective Murphy has officers watching my apartment until Marcus is sentenced, and I'm moving back home with my parents for a while. Good, because Marcus is dangerous until he's locked up. Elena paused at the door. Sarah, can I ask you something? How are you so calm about all this? If someone had done to me what Marcus did to you? Sarah looked at Hope sleeping in her arms. Because being angry won't help my daughter grow up strong and safe. Making sure Marcus can't hurt anyone else will. As Elena left the hospital, she thought about Sarah's strength and grace in the face of unimaginable betrayal. Marcus had tried to destroy Sarah completely, but instead he'd created something he couldn't understand, a mother's love that was stronger than his cruelty. Now that love was going to make sure Marcus paid for everything he'd done. Marcus Cole sat in the county jail interview room, wearing an orange jumpsuit and an expression of barely controlled rage. His court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Mike Santos, reviewed the case file with obvious concern. Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The evidence is fabricated. My wife is mentally unstable, and her mother is a judge who's using her influence to railroad me. Santos looked up from the file. Marcus, we have security camera footage of you bringing a golf club into your house. We have your recorded confession to Elena Foster. We have financial records showing you forged your wife's signature multiple times. Sarah signed those documents. She's confused about what happened because of pregnancy hormones affecting her memory. Santos stared at his client. Marcus, do you understand the charges against you? Attempted murder in the first degree, domestic violence, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy? You're looking at 25 years minimum. I want to represent myself. That would be extremely unwise. I know how the legal system works. I've been dealing with insurance claims and legal procedures for years. Santos closed the file. Marcus, your wife nearly died. Your premature daughter spent weeks in intensive care. A jury is going to see the photos of Sarah's injuries, and they're going to want to punish someone. Don't make it easier for them. What are you suggesting? Plea bargain. 15 years for voluntary manslaughter and fraud. You'd be eligible for parole in 8 years. Marcus laughed bitterly. 8 years for defending myself against a woman who was trying to destroy my life and reputation. Defending yourself, Marcus. You beat your pregnant wife with a golf club. I disciplined my wife for snooping through my personal property and making false accusations. Santos stared at Marcus in disbelief. You disciplined her, Marcus. You nearly killed her. Sarah's always been dramatic about minor physical corrections. This time she's using her injuries to manipulate the legal system. Santos realized he was dealing with someone completely detached from reality. Marcus, I strongly recommend you accept the plea deal. I'm going to trial, and I'm going to prove that Sarah Thompson is a mentally unstable woman who manipulated her wealthy family into filing false charges against an innocent man. How do you plan to prove that? Marcus smiled coldly. I have evidence of Sarah's mental instability. Photos of her following me to work. Recordings of her making hysterical phone calls. Documentation of her paranoid behavior. Santos felt sick. Marcus, you stalked your own wife and documented it to make her look crazy. I documented my wife's concerning behavior patterns for her own protection. That's not going to work with a jury. It worked with Amanda Wilson 3 years ago. Santos looked through the file again. Amanda Wilson dropped her charges because you paid her $43,000. I provided financial assistance to help Amanda move on with her life after our relationship ended badly. You bought her silence. I helped her understand that false accusations would hurt both of us unnecessarily. Santos closed the file again. Marcus, I can't represent someone who doesn't understand the seriousness of their situation. I'm going to recommend the court assign you a different attorney. I told you, I'm representing myself. Then you're going to lose everything. After Santos left, Marcus sat alone in the interview room, planning his defense strategy. He'd convinced the jury that Sarah was an unstable woman from a wealthy family who'd manipulated the legal system to destroy an innocent man. He'd show them the evidence of her paranoid behavior, her history of making false accusations, her tendency toward dramatic overreactions. Marcus had spent years perfecting his ability to make his victims look crazy while he looked reasonable. He wasn't going to stop now just because the stakes were higher. What Marcus didn't know was that Judge Patricia Wells was already 3 steps ahead of him. She'd seen his type before, manipulative abusers who thought they could charm their way out of consequences. She'd been planning his complete legal destruction since the moment she saw her daughter lying broken in that hospital bed. The trial was still 2 months away, but Patricia had already made sure that every piece of evidence against Marcus was properly documented, every witness was prepared, and every legal precedent was researched. Marcus Cole thought he understood the legal system. He was about to learn that understanding insurance claims was very different from facing a prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence cases, supported by a family court judge who'd made it her life's work to protect women like Sarah. The reckoning was just beginning, and Marcus had no idea what was coming for him. Elena Foster sat in Detective Murphy's office, reviewing her statement one more time before Marcus's trial. 3 months had passed since the attack, and Hope was now a healthy 5-pound baby who smiled when she saw Elena's face. Elena, are you ready for Marcus's attorney to try to discredit your testimony? Detective Murphy asked. What do you mean? Marcus fired his public defender and hired a private attorney. Someone's paying for expensive legal representation. Elena frowned. Who would pay for Marcus's lawyer? We're still investigating that, but his new attorney is going to argue that you're lying about the fake text messages to protect yourself from charges of adultery and harassment. That's ridiculous. There's physical evidence on my phone. Marcus's lawyer will claim you deleted the real messages and fabricated the evidence to avoid responsibility for breaking up his marriage. Elena felt sick. Will a jury believe that? Not if we present the evidence properly. But Elena, there's something else. Marcus has been making threats from jail. Detective Murphy pulled out a folder of printed documents. These are letters Marcus has been sending to various people. His ex-girlfriend Amanda Wilson, your co-workers, Sarah's friends at the hospital. Elena read one of the letters addressed to her. It was typed, formal, and chilling in its calculated tone. Elena, you have made a serious mistake by lying to police about our relationship. When I am vindicated in court, I will pursue legal action against you for defamation and false testimony. You will lose your reputation, and your financial security. I suggest you reconsider your statement before trial. He's trying to intimidate me into changing my testimony. Marcus thinks he can control the outcome of his trial the same way he controlled everything else in his life. He's wrong. Detective Murphy's phone rang. Murphy here. What? When we'll be right there. He hung up and looked at Elena with concern. Marcus's new lawyer just filed a motion to have his trial moved to a different county. He's claiming he can't get a fair trial here because of publicity and judicial bias. Judicial bias. He's trying to get Judge Patricia Wells recused from any involvement in his case. Elena stood up. Can he do that? He can try, but Marcus doesn't understand that Patricia Wells isn't presiding over his criminal trial. She's a family court judge. Her involvement is limited to the custody and financial matters. What custody matters? Sarah has full custody of Hope. Detective Murphy smiled grimly. Not according to Marcus. He's filed for joint custody and visitation rights. Elena stared at him in disbelief. He wants custody of the daughter he tried to kill. Marcus is claiming that Hope was injured due to Sarah's negligence, not his actions. He's arguing that Sarah is an unfit mother who puts their child at risk. That's insane. That's Marcus. He's going to use his trial as a platform to destroy Sarah's reputation and paint himself as the victim of a vindictive woman from a wealthy family. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency at hospital. Hope having breathing problems. Can you come? Elena showed Detective Murphy the message. I have to go. Elena, be careful. Marcus has been in contact with some questionable people since his arrest. His gambling creditors are still pressuring him, and desperate men do dangerous things. Elena drove to St. Mary's Hospital, her mind racing. Marcus was more dangerous now than he'd been before his arrest because he had nothing left to lose. His reputation was destroyed. His finances were frozen, and his freedom depended on convincing a jury that his victims were lying. She found Sarah in the NICU, holding Hope while a doctor examined the baby's breathing. Patricia Wells stood beside them, looking like a woman prepared for war. How is she? Elena asked. False alarm, Sarah said with relief. Hope's fine, but Elena, I need to tell you something. Marcus's new lawyer contacted me today. What did he want? Patricia answered for her daughter. He offered Sarah a deal. Drop all charges against Marcus, agree to joint custody, and accept a financial settlement for her injuries. What kind of financial settlement? $500,000, the exact amount of the life insurance policy Marcus took out on Sarah. Elena felt the pieces clicking together. Someone's funding Marcus's defense and his settlement offers. His gambling creditors, Patricia said. They want their money back, and they think Marcus's trial is bad for business. They're trying to make this go away quietly. Sarah looked at Elena with determination. I told his lawyer exactly what he could do with his settlement offer. What did you say? That Marcus Cole is going to prison for attempted murder, and he's never going to have unsupervised access to my daughter. Patricia smiled proudly. Sarah's testimony is going to destroy Marcus's defense completely. But we need your testimony to prove the fake affair was premeditated deception. I'll testify to everything, Elena said without hesitation. Marcus tried to kill you and Hope. He manipulated both of us. He needs to pay for what he did. As Elena left the hospital that evening, she thought about the choice facing her. She could change her testimony, claim the affair was real, and avoid Marcus's legal threats. Or she could tell the truth and help ensure that a dangerous predator went to prison. The choice was easy. Elena had seen what Marcus was capable of when he thought he was losing control. She wasn't going to let him manipulate his way out of consequences again. Marcus Cole was about to learn that some people couldn't be intimidated, threatened, or bought, and sometimes aroused. The truth was stronger than all his careful lies. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Marcus Cole's trial. Sarah sat in the front row, holding 6-month-old Hope, with Patricia Wells beside her. Elena Foster sat with Detective Murphy, reviewing her testimony notes one final time. Marcus entered wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his hair styled, his expression confident. His expensive attorney, David Richardson, had clearly coached him on projecting innocence in wounded dignity. Prosecutor Linda Parker stood to give her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a man who tried to commit the perfect murder. Marcus Cole didn't beat his pregnant wife in a moment of rage. He planned her death methodically, systematically, over months of careful preparation. Richardson countered with his opening. This case is about a troubled woman from a wealthy family who manipulated the legal system to destroy an innocent man. Sarah Thompson has a history of unstable behavior, false accusations, and emotional volatility that culminated in false charges against her devoted husband. The prosecution's case was devastating. Detective Murphy testified about the security footage, the forged financial documents, and Marcus's recorded confession to Elena. The emergency room doctor described Sarah's injuries in clinical detail that made several jurors visibly uncomfortable. When Sarah took the stand, she spoke clearly and calmly about 2 years of escalating abuse. She described Marcus's systematic control of their finances, his monitoring of her movements, his psychological manipulation designed to make her doubt her own perceptions. Mrs. Thompson, Prosecutor Parker asked, "Did you ever have an affair with Elena Foster?" "No. I'd never met Elena Foster until after the attack. The affair was entirely fictional, created by my husband using fake text messages." Richardson's cross-examination was brutal. "Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that you were following your husband to work, photographing him with female colleagues, and making accusatory phone calls to his office?" Sarah remained calm. "Those photos were taken by Marcus himself. He would park my car near his office building, take pictures of himself with female coworkers, then show me the photos as evidence that I was stalking him. That's a very convenient explanation. It's the truth. Marcus documented his own fake evidence to make me look unstable." Elena's testimony was equally powerful. She explained how Marcus had cloned her phone, created fake messages, and used her as an unwitting accomplice in his elaborate deception. "Miss Foster," Richardson asked during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you're lying about these fake messages to avoid responsibility for destroying the Thompson marriage?" "No, sir. I never had any romantic contact with Marcus Cole. He manipulated both his wife and me as part of his plan to justify attempted murder." The prosecution's star witness was Amanda Wilson, Marcus's ex-girlfriend. She testified about the identical pattern of abuse she'd suffered 3 years earlier, and how Marcus had paid her to drop charges. "Miss Wilson, why did you accept money from the defendant instead of pursuing justice?" Amanda looked directly at Marcus. "Because I was terrified. Marcus had spent months making me believe I was crazy, that no one would believe me over him. The $43,000 felt like my only way to escape." When Marcus took the stand in his own defense, his performance was chilling. He showed no emotion, no remorse, no acknowledgement that he'd done anything wrong. "Mr. Cole," his attorney asked, "did you intentionally harm your wife?" "I disciplined Sarah for violating my privacy and making false accusations that could have destroyed my career and reputation." The word disciplined sent a visible shock through the courtroom. "And how did you discipline her?" "I used appropriate physical correction to help Sarah understand the seriousness of her behavior." Prosecutor Parker's cross-examination was devastating. "Mr. Cole, you consider beating your pregnant wife with a golf club to be appropriate physical correction." "I used reasonable force to protect myself and my family's future from Sarah's destructive behavior." "Your family's future, Cole, you nearly killed your unborn daughter." Marcus showed no emotion. The baby's injuries were an unfortunate consequence of Sarah's poor choices. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to read the verdict. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of domestic violence with great bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. On the charges of identity theft and fraud, we find the defendant guilty." Marcus showed no reaction as each guilty verdict was read. Even when sentenced to 28 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years, his expression remained blank. After the sentencing, Sarah stood outside the courthouse holding hope, surrounded by the women who had fought for her, Patricia, Elena, and Rachel. "It's over," Patricia said. "Marcus will never hurt you or anyone else again." Sarah looked at Elena. "I need to thank you. If you hadn't been brave enough to confront Marcus and testify, we saved each other," Elena interrupted. "That's what we do now." 6 months later, Sarah stood at a podium in the community center, speaking to a room full of domestic violence survivors. Hope, now a healthy 1-year-old, sat in Patricia's lap in the front row. My name is Sarah Thompson. 18 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, beaten unconscious by the man who promised to love me. Today, I'm here to tell you that survival is possible, healing is possible, and justice is possible. After her speech, a young woman approached with tears in her eyes. My husband has been hurting me for 2 years. I've been too scared to leave because he says no one will believe me. Sarah took the woman's hands. What's your name, Jennifer? Jennifer, I believe you, and I'm going to help you get safe. As Sarah helped another survivor take the first steps toward freedom, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Marcus had tried to destroy her completely, but instead he'd created something he couldn't understand, a community of women who refused to let anyone fall through the cracks. Hope gurgled happily in her grandmother's arms, surrounded by women who would make sure she grew up knowing that love meant building someone up, not tearing them down. Marcus Cole was locked away where he could never hurt anyone again. But his victims had transformed their trauma into something powerful, a network of survivors dedicated to protecting others from men like him. Justice hadn't just been served. Justice had been transformed into something bigger, something lasting, something that would protect countless women who would never even know Sarah's name. And that was the most perfect revenge of all. 2 years after the trial, Sarah Thompson stood in her new apartment, watching Hope take her first steps toward Elena Foster, who had become not just a friend, but a sister. The space was bright and open, filled with photos of Hope's milestones and artwork from the children at the domestic violence shelter, where Sarah now worked as a counselor. Mama, look, Hope toddled across the room with the determination of someone who'd been fighting since the day she was born. Sarah scooped up her daughter, marveling at how much strength could exist in such a small person. Hope had no memory of those terrifying first weeks in the NICU. No knowledge of how close she'd come to never taking a breath. All she knew was love, safety, and the certainty that the women around her would protect her no matter what. Sarah, are you ready for the interview? Elena asked, adjusting the camera setup they'd arranged in the living room. Today marked the second anniversary of Marcus's conviction, and a local news station wanted to do a follow-up story about Sarah's transformation from victim to advocate. More importantly, they wanted to highlight the Hope Foundation, which had already helped over 300 women escape abusive relationships. Patricia Wells arrived carrying coffee and pastries, looking every inch the formidable family court judge she'd become. Under her leadership, the county had implemented new protocols for domestic violence cases that were being adopted across the state. How many women are you expecting at tonight's support group meeting? Patricia asked. 15 new participants this month. Sarah replied. Word is spreading that there's a place where people will believe you and help you build a new life. Rachel Bennett knocked on the door, arriving early for her shift at the Foundation's childcare center. She'd left her diner job to work full-time helping other single mothers navigate the legal and financial challenges of leaving abusive relationships. Any word from Detective Murphy about the Wilson case? Rachel asked. Elena nodded grimly. Marcus's gambling associates tried to intimidate Amanda Wilson into recanting her testimony, but Murphy's building a racketeering case against them. They picked the wrong people to threaten. The news crew arrived promptly at 3 o'clock. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Martinez, had covered Sarah's original story and requested specifically to do the follow-up. Sarah, when we first met 2 years ago, you were struggling to survive. Today you're helping other women find their strength. What changed? Sarah settled Hope on her lap before answering. I realized that my experience wasn't unique. Marcus had hurt other women before me, and he would have hurt more women after me if we hadn't stopped him. My survival only mattered if I used it to protect others. Elena, you went from unknowing accomplice to key witness. How did that transformation happen? Elena smiled at Hope, who was reaching for the camera. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the reason you find your purpose. Marcus tried to make me complicit in attempted murder. Instead, he gave me a reason to fight for women like Sarah. Judge Wells, how has the legal system changed in response to cases like your daughter's? Patricia's expression grew serious. We've learned that domestic violence isn't just about individual relationships. It's about systematic patterns of control and manipulation that require systematic responses. The Hope Foundation works directly with family courts, police departments, and social services to make sure no woman falls through the cracks. After the interview, the women sat around Sarah's kitchen table while Hope napped in her crib. This had become their weekly tradition, a chance to decompress, plan, and simply enjoy each other's company. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Elena said quietly. "I got a letter from Marcus yesterday." The room went silent. Marcus had been sending occasional letters to various people involved in his case, always maintaining his innocence and threatening future legal action. "What did he say this time?" Patricia asked. "Same thing as always, that he's innocent, that we conspired against him, that he'll prove his innocence someday." Elena shook her head. "But Patricia, he also mentioned Hope specifically. He wants visitation rights when he gets out of prison." Sarah felt the familiar chill that Marcus's name always brought. "He's not getting out for at least 13 more years. Hope will be 15 by then. And he'll never get visitation rights," Patricia added firmly. "Marcus Cole forfeited any parental rights when he tried to murder both of you. I'll make sure that decision is legally ironclad." Rachel spoke up. "Do you think he's changed at all? Learned anything from being in prison?" Elena pulled out Marcus's letter. "Listen to this. I was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by unstable women who used the legal system to destroy an innocent man. When I am vindicated, those responsible will face the consequences of their false accusations." "He still doesn't understand that what he did was wrong," Sarah said. "In his mind, he's the victim and we're the villains. That's what makes men like Marcus so dangerous," Patricia explained. "They never accept responsibility for their actions. Everything is always someone else's fault." As evening approached, women began arriving for the weekly support group meeting. Sarah watched them file into the community center next door, some confident and healing, others still bearing the shell-shocked expression of recent escape. Tonight's group included Jennifer, the young woman who'd approached Sarah after her first speaking engagement. 2 years later, Jennifer was divorced, financially independent, and training to become a domestic violence counselor herself. "Before we begin tonight," Sarah addressed the group, "I want everyone to look around this room. Every woman here survived something that was meant to destroy her. Every woman here chose courage over fear, truth over manipulation, hope over despair." She gestured to Hope, who was playing quietly in the corner with the other children. "My daughter was born into violence, but she's growing up surrounded by the strongest women I know. She'll never doubt her worth, never accept less than respect, never believe that love means accepting abuse." After the meeting, as the women cleaned up and said their goodbyes, Elena found Sarah standing by the window watching Hope play. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "I'm thinking about how Marcus tried to create the perfect crime. Murder disguised as domestic violence, fake evidence to justify his actions, insurance money to solve his financial problems." Sarah turned to face Elena. "But he created something he never intended." "What's that?" "He created a family, not through marriage or blood, but through shared trauma and shared purpose. He tried to isolate me, but instead he connected me to the strongest community I've ever known." Elena smiled. "Marcus thought he understood manipulation and control, but he never understood love. Real love builds people up instead of tearing them down. Real love protects instead of destroys. Real love creates instead of controls." Patricia joined them at the window. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. The State Attorney General's office has asked us to consult on a new domestic violence prevention program. They want to implement the Hope Foundation model statewide." Sarah felt tears of pride and gratitude building. "Mom, when you found me in that hospital bed, did you ever imagine it would lead to this? I imagined my daughter would survive and heal. Everything else has been beyond my wildest dreams." As they prepared to leave, Sarah looked around the community center that had become the heart of their mission. Tomorrow, more women would walk through these doors carrying the same fear and desperation she'd once felt, but they would also find the same hope, support, and determination that had transformed her life. Marcus Cole had tried to write the ending to Sarah's story. Instead, he'd given her the beginning of something he could never destroy: a purpose bigger than his cruelty, a community stronger than his manipulation, and a love more powerful than his hate. Hope ran to her mother with outstretched arms, and Sarah scooped her up. thinking about all the children who would grow up safer because of the work they were doing. All the women who would find their strength because someone had believed them. All the families that would stay together because they'd learned that real love looked nothing like what Marcus Cole had called love. The perfect revenge wasn't Marcus Cole rotting in prison, though that brought Sarah satisfaction. The perfect revenge was the life she'd built from the ashes of his destruction, a life filled with purpose, community, and the kind of love that healed instead of harmed. Marcus had lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, his future. But Sarah had gained something invaluable, the knowledge that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about transforming her trauma into triumph, pain into purpose, and fear into the fierce determination to protect others. As they walked home under the stars, Hope babbling happily in her mother's arms, Sarah realized that this was what victory looked like. Not dramatic courtroom scenes or public vindication, but quiet moments filled with love, safety, and the certain knowledge that tomorrow would be better than today. Marcus Cole had tried to end their story. Instead, he'd given them the beginning of something beautiful, something lasting, something that would protect countless women long after his name was forgotten. And that was the most perfect justice of all.